It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
The question we're trying to answer today is FIRE still possible? What are the things that are taking place right now today, and how might that be affecting my ability to retire early? How might that be something that has an impact on that? So we thought it'd be interesting to look through, okay, what are some things taking place right now? What are some things that are present that are helping people in their FIRE journey? What are sort of like the wind in the sails that are advantages right now? And one of the very easy ones is like technology. It's really, really easy to think about how technology has changed the whole world. But specifically, as it relates to the financial independent and retire early movement, technology has very much changed the way that you can go about even creating income for yourself.
Yeah, I love the innovation. Technology is making us all have more options and opportunities. One of the things that's going on right now that's got everybody, it's captured kind of pop culture and society, is this fondness for looking back to the 1980s. I mean, you think about how popular the Top Gun Maverick is right now. You think about Stranger Things. And what do they do in Stranger Things to grab us all is that the side hustle or the way you make extra money in the past, the reason they can reach us so easily with nostalgia is because we're all doing the same thing. There was no choices. So a side hustle 20 years ago, like for myself, by the way, we should have gone back further than 20 years because I've been doing this for 20 years. We'd have to go back a few more decades to get to when I was working at Hardee's in fast food. And look, my mom was a school teacher, and it was not uncommon during all of the holidays that all the school teachers, you would go to Walmart, and a lot of the school teachers during the Thanksgiving or Christmas holiday breaks were working at Walmart in the cashier department or doing other things. And of course, there's things like cleaning. These things have been going on, but it's a whole new world now. And if you want to generate additional income, it's not these basics.
Yeah, what I think is so interesting is that these vocations 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 40 years ago required a lot of your time, and there were some location parameters. You had to show up at Hardee's to be the crew chief. Well, now side hustles can be done from your bedroom, whether it's selling a business on, selling items on eBay, web development, copywriting, graphic design, freelance. A lot of these things can be done in your spare time, and a lot of them can be incredibly lucrative. So where it was very difficult 30, 40 years ago to go out and create a side income in addition to the job you're working for your normal day job, that's just not the case today. It is much more easy to go out and to create additional income that ultimately can lead to additional savings.
Yeah, and like DoorDash. I mean, we have folks here that, because it's one of those things where if you just have some extra time, you can go make some extra money. It didn't used to be like that. You had to do a lot more commitment. You had to go through a whole process. So I love that innovation has created that. Let's talk about also another innovation or technology thing. I mentioned earlier, and I kind of alluded to this, budgeting. I mean, I want you guys to go back and look at the personal finance books that I first looked at. And the way you would budget is you'd go to the very back of this book that you bought, and there'd be worksheets.
And you'd rip out
at the back. You'd either have to, cut it out, rip it out, or you'd have to take it to work with you and try to,
make a copy with the
break the crease it, and you'd have to photocopy so you could do budget worksheets. Now you have mobile apps that not only can you go and custom, in a custom way, put in your expenditures, you can also just download the transactions, bring them in. So you don't, it's more of a monitor, like a CFO of your own personal finances versus you have to be a bookkeeper, the CFO. We've really cut the corner in a lot of good ways.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because of the way technology has changed the world. I think back then people said, I don't know how to budget. I don't really understand it. Now, if you can use a smartphone, you can budget because the apps make it incredibly easy. They make it incredibly intuitive. They actually bring the transactions in for you. And all you have to say is, this was groceries. This was going to the laundry store. I don't know what a laundry store is.
It's a laundromat.
A laundromat. You don't go buy laundry
I've been to a laundromat all through college.
And it'll actually categorize and classify that for you. So if you're not budgeting or you're someone who maybe doesn't have an eye on what you spend, you should start paying attention to this because how on earth can you know how much you need to spend if you don't know what you're actually spending right now? Technology has made that much easier.
Hey, well, this was not in the show notes, but when you just threw out this whole laundromat thing, just to give you a little perspective, I think now if you went to a laundromat, everybody's going to be on their own personal phone, probably have AirPods in or whatever, listen to it. Back when I was, in the day, I'll just say back in the day.
Back in your day?
You could go to a laundromat, they'd have movies playing.
Oh, so you just sit there and watch a movie.
They'd set a VCR up, and it would be loud enough. So because remember, we didn't all have mobile phones that were doing stuff.
Our entire content team just said, "What's a VCR?"
Yeah, but that's. I just want you to know that's once again back to Stranger Things. How we're all doing the same stuff. That is nostalgic because we were forced because technology didn't allow us to have a lot of variation. Take advantage of the cool stuff, and that leads to, and this is really powerful. Investing has gotten so much easier. There's not been a better time to be alive to be an investor because look, when I started even investing for myself, because I came out working in public accounting, I mean, the first fund I bought had a deferred sales charge that went down every year.
And how'd you buy it? Were you able to just go online?
No, I had to call one of my coworkers, roommates, was selling things for John Hancock Insurance, and he sold me a mutual fund. And it had a deferred sales charge. It had an internal operating expense of 2.5%. It was expensive. Guys, now you can buy index funds that are as close to free as there's even some that are actually labeled as free. So, I mean, we even had, and I think this is a good point for us to do kind of a case study of what are the benefits that have come because index investing and technology has made it so much easier to get into this now.
Yeah, Brian, you always say when it comes to like index versus active management, there's really sort of three things you can look at that really sort of tilts the scales in the favor of index funds. One is cost. The second is performance, and the third is tax efficiency. Those three things. Well, here's a really easy case study. If you look at the largest actively managed large cap blend fund, it's an American Funds Washington Mutual Fund, versus just a large S&P 500 index, and we just use Fidelity as an example. The American Fund's internal expense ratio is 0.58%. Certainly less expensive than 2% you noted when you started investing. But when you compare that to the internal expense ratio of the S&P 500 at Fidelity, it's 0.015%. So it is a fraction of the cost. Well, then you can compare the performance, even in a really strong, really positive bull market, over the last 3 years, the last 5 years, and the last 10 years. The index has outperformed the actively managed fund. And then you can look at the third thing, the turnover ratio, and that just determines how often are they buying and selling inside of the fund, which leads to tax efficiency or inefficiency. Right now, inside of the American Funds Washington Mutual Fund, it has a 19% turnover ratio. The Fidelity S&P 500 has a 2%. So you're naturally going to have less capital gains distributed out to you in the index fund.
So I love it when we do case studies or comparisons. I do want to kind of clarify because I asked the team in the content meeting, I was like, why did we choose this fund? I want to make sure nobody thinks we're picking on American Fund. It's the largest. So that's what they grabbed the largest. And then I always, because typically we show up a slide that shows, especially if you go to long term, like 10, 15 year annual, it doesn't matter which asset class you look at, large cap, international, small cap. About 80% of the time, the index fund outperforms a lot of the active management peers. And it makes sense. I mean, we just in quick review, the internal expenses fraction, it costs just pennies compared to the money that you'd have to spend with an active manager. You can see the performance is strong. And then the taxes, it's so much lower because they just don't have the distributions on an index fund that you would with the active manager. Take advantage of that. Harness that power.
Okay, so we talked about how technology has made it easier to go do side hustle and create income. It's made it easier to budget. There are tools at your disposal. It's made investing less expensive. Another thing that's really interesting, and this is very much inside of like recent memory, inside of present day, is that in this post-pandemic world that we're living in this post-2020 COVID world, this idea of work from anywhere or be able to do not just my side hustle, but even my day job from some other place, some other geography is becoming more and more and more of a reality.
Yeah, it does feel like we accelerated on the adoption of certain technology. Look, we were one of the early advisors that were working with clients all over the country through Zoom calls, GoToMeeting, and that stuff. Now it just seems so much more normalized.
That's right.
And I think it is interesting, and Daniel found this stat for us, is that 22% expect to be fully remote with their working by the year 2025.
And these aren't like the side hustle gigs. These aren't the people working on their own. These are actually employees, folks that are doing the same job they were doing 5 years ago, just now they're doing it fully remote from their home or from some other geography. It's really amazing how technology has made that possible.
Well, we've actually have a case study or an example, an experience share from an employee that wanted to be part of the fire movement and retire earlier. but they also knew they were geographically moving. And it was one of those things where it was like the perfect situation where the employer was like, hey, you're a great employee. I don't want you to leave yet. And the employee's like, yeah, but my family and we want to go ahead and need to move to get the kids in school, change geographic locations. And because of technology, the employer's like, fine, we'll work with you on that. I mean, and that's the thing. So see what opportunities this new modern world we live in kind of provides for you to have more flexibility, more options, and it could help you in this journey to financial independence and retiring early.
Now, I think this other benefit, this one is interesting because this is one that I don't think that we talk about a lot. Now, Brian, you and I are fortunate because we have been working with clients for over a decade now remotely. So we saw people doing the FIRE thing before FIRE was cool. And it was really interesting. We have some clients who retired in their early to mid 40s, and they would go out and meet somebody and they'd say, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I'm retired. I'm like, oh, a tough break, you get laid off. It was just not this common thing. Now there's actually a community of folks. There's an entire, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I think community or
community,
I mean, but it is one of those things where there's now bloggers, there's YouTube. It's a movement. I mean, without a doubt.
There's an entire movement
There's an entire
around this
movement of
idea.
support of you to get good information on this.